If you are boarding a United Airlines flight and you see a black pilot, they are conditioning you to think, I don't know if he's there because he's a wonderful pilot. And that's not good. I don't want to live in that country. I don't want to have that kind of lens. But that will be a rational thought that someone will have because of now the hiring quotas and because of the way that we are now putting people in positions of authority and power.
That incredibly irrational thought comes from right-wing Cabbage Patch Kid Charlie Kirk. Kirk is ramping up right-wing anxiety about equity in the workplace by claiming that diversity programs make things like air travel less safe. But Charlie isn't done. Listen for yourself.
What they call equity is they want to create a world where you are in a deficit if you are white. That is the world they're trying to create. And it's really cruel to say that. But when they say equity, they're trying to make it where you have a structural disadvantage through hiring.
Almost like apartheid.
Of course it is.
I know, almost sounds like apartheid.
But that's what South Africa did. Is South Africa took the awful kind of immoral approach to apartheid, and they just flipped it upside down. They just said, okay, now we're gonna extract revenge on the colonizers because now we're in charge.
Yeah, that's right. Charlie Kirk and the fascist bunch just compared addressing the long-term effects of racism to South Africa's violent apartheid regime. And that's a neat little trick Charlie just pulled. In one breath, he's argued both that racism doesn't really exist, and also that any attempts to fight racism are themselves racism. You know, that thing Charlie Kirk just said didn't exist. But let's move past the offensive idea that black pilots aren't being hired on merit, and that airlines would risk crashing their planes in order to satisfy some imaginary diversity police. Instead, let's look at something Charlie Kirk hates: actual data. Only about 2% of pilots are black, compared to whites who make up about 85%. And that number hasn't changed very much. 30 years ago, about 1.8% of pilots were black. If the liberal diversity police are out there forcing airlines to hire black pilots, they're doing a pretty bad job. In fact, most of the quote-unquote diversity programs Charlie Kirk is mad at have nothing to do with commercial pilots. They're designed to provide economic opportunity to low-income and minority groups by lowering the cost of attending flight school. Charlie obviously isn't a pilot, or he'd know there's a huge difference between going to flight school and piloting a Dreamliner. Okay, so Charlie Kirk is a globe-headed doofus who doesn't know the first thing about planes or pilots. But Kirk isn't the only right-wing gasbag spreading conspiracy theories about how diversity programs are going to kill your grandmother on her flight to Florida. Here's Fox News ghoul Tucker Carlson saying the quiet part even louder.
Biden imposed the principles of equity on the airlines, and that meant dramatically lowering hiring standards for pilots and for air traffic controllers, and disgracefully, the airlines went along with it. Result? There have been several near disasters in aviation recently, with hundreds of lives at stake in each case.
So listen carefully to what Tucker actually said. Since airlines have been taking diversity hiring more seriously, the total number of accidents has remain the same, at 0. But according to Tucker, that doesn't matter. Some accidents almost happened, none of which actually involved minority pilots. Tucker is using a lot of words to hide a simple fact. Nothing has actually changed. Take a guess at your statistical odds of dying in a commercial airliner crash over the past decade. Did you guess 0? Because that's right. There has not been a single fatal commercial airliner crash in over a decade. That goal, called effective 0, was once considered impossible. In every single sense of the word, air travel is safer than it's ever been before. But don't tell Tucker Carlson that.
And it's not just United, it's everywhere. Southwest Airlines' in-house pilot training program, called Destination 225, has dramatically lowered its standards. Many of its graduates wind up working for a charter company called Swift Air, which is under contract from the Biden administration to fly illegal aliens around the country without the American population knowing about it. But other graduates wind up flying for Southwest Airlines. Last year, a newly hired first officer on a Southwest flight, formerly a flight attendant, hit the runway so hard on landing that a crew member was gravely injured. So this is what it looks like in real terms when you decide that identity is more important than aptitude in something critical like aviation.
If you're paying attention to Tucker's actual words, none of the examples he's using have anything to do with diversity programs or race. In fact, most of Tucker's whining has to do with airlines lowering standards across the board, except that's not true either. The FAA explicitly rejected airline requests to lower standards just last year. There are a couple of big pipelines for commercial airline pilots. One is the Air Force. That shouldn't surprise you. It's the nation's biggest employer of pilots. But as jobs open up across the economy, fewer Americans are joining the Air Force. As a result, fewer are becoming pilots, and that Air Force to airline pathway has dried up. Another big driver is the cost. The expenses related to getting a pilot's license have never been higher. Most young Americans are simply priced out of getting their license at all, much less putting in the hours to qualify for an airline job. 80% of flight school students drop out before completing their training. There simply aren't enough pilots to meet demand. That's why airlines have enacted the very programs Tucker and Charlie are complaining about. The airline industry is in a tough situation, but idiots like Charlie Kirk and Tucker Carlson don't care about that. They want to spin their race-based conspiracy theories to once again put Black Americans in the hot seat of conservative rage. Pilots should call this hate speech out for the unhelpful con that it is. If you made it to the end, thanks so much for watching. I've seen some of your comments about my gray beard hairs, and I just want to say, I've got my eye on you. So please feel free to leave a comment below and let me know what I should cover next.